Okay, good day, and thank you for joining me today. In this session, I'm going to talk about distributed workforces and how to support a remote BIM team. Before I start, I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself and give you a quick overview of what I do. So, my name is Holger de Groot. I'm the CEO and founding director of Modmation, and as a certified BIM manager, I provide BIM and digital engineering consulting services to our clients within the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. And beside my work as a consultant, I'm also the vice chairperson at Building Smart Australasia and a seasonal lecturer at the University of New South Wales. Modmation, so that's the company that I work for and that I also run. Um, so at Modmation, we focusing on digital design and construction, which plays an ever increasing role in all aspects of today's AECO industry. And over the last, I would say 15 years, our team members have supported companies working with virtual team members in over 7 different countries. And the strategies that we use today, they reflect our years of experience figuring out what works best to keep teams efficient. So Modmation itself is focusing on 4 areas. We're focusing on the people. So we provide skill assessments, training, like software training, but also BIM management training and policy and standards and so on, and also live support. In the technology field, we are focusing on integration, like system integration, transformation, like digital transformation, and automation, so automating workflows and processes. And in the policy space, we're focusing on consulting work, like BIM consulting, strategy development, like BIM implementation or digital transformation strategies, and of course, standards, like standards development for companies, but also implementing industry standards into an organization. And the fourth and last area is processes. So we're focusing on process optimization, providing BIM management services, clash detection and coordination, clash resolution, and quality, so quality assurance and quality control. But enough about me, enough about Modmation. Let's start talking about what we actually want to talk about. And we will start talking about remote support challenges, followed by the rules of engagement to address those challenges that we face today when we work with a remote team. We talk about a bit about cloud collaboration, then following coaching, mentoring, and managing, what effect that has on how we work with a remote team. And then at the end, a short lessons learned, a summary of what we talked about. And if we have some time left, we can also answer some questions. So what are actually our issues today? Like, what is making remote support a challenge in some situations? So with COVID-19 pandemic, when that started and took quite a long time to get through it, many projects teams and the BIM manager in particular, they found themselves working remotely and separated from each other for the first time. And that basically gave us 6 different situations that BIM managers had to deal with. So the easiest one was basically working in an office, located together, just keeping the distance in regards of the requirements. Or we started to working remotely, being co-located, working from different locations. Or we were completely distributed, people working from home and not going to any remote locations at all. And then, of course, we had the situation. We were all working apart from each other, but at the same time, or we were actually working apart from each other in different time zones. However, what we saw over the last couple of years, or still in the last couple of months, particular from an HR perspective, they do still prefer that people, even if they work remote, still work in the same time zone, because the way we work in our industry is still heavily driven by a culture of meetings. So today, distributed teams, I think we can agree that this is just not a temporary fix. That is a new way of working, and it's an opportunity to imagine traditional approaches to collaboration. different approach of how we worked before the pandemic came and we had to change everything. So what you see here is the project percentage of employees working remotely before and after the pandemic, based on response to 3 Gartner surveys. And according to Gartner, we can see that about 30% of employees worked remotely at least some of the time before COVID-19, and nearly 1 in 10 worked remotely all the time. However, today, so as we went through the pandemic and the way we worked has changed, we can now project that about 48% of employees will keep working remotely. So we can see that half of the people actually got used to it and see the benefits of having the opportunity to work remotely. And at least one time, only 1 out of 5 employees, they work remotely all the time. However, working remotely is one thing, but from a BIM's management perspective, BIM supporting a remote team while managing building information models is a complete different challenge. So to address these demands of changes, the new way of working, particularly from a perspective of a BIM manager, companies need to reopen the debate about moving projects to people rather than moving people to projects. So companies have to start thinking differently to meet the demand changes of their staff members. And we also have to be able to adopt digital workflows and to support the scope or the cope with remote working. Many companies, and that is including Modmation, already successfully as 100% remote team. But from a holistic point of view, it is still not a common company structure in our AEC industry. So today, companies, as they went through the pandemic, have become more agile and they have started to upgrade their technology. We saw more tools, more workflow being pushed into the cloud environment. However, it is important also to assembly teams that are capable of working in such a remote environment. So when supporting teams remotely, we as BIM managers need to understand the factors that can make remote work incredibly challenging. And if we don't, teams may experience declines in performance and engagement when they begin working remotely, especially in the absence of training and support in person. So based on that, I assume that we can all agree that emails alone are insufficient as a tool to communicate. So remote teams need tools that give them visual clues, like if they were supported face-to-face. We saw that, or we still see this also when we support companies or teams, project teams, that teams often express concerns about the lack of face-to-face interaction. Some feel that remote BIM managers are out of touch with their needs and thereby are not really supportive. And that can cause team members to feel less belonging to a team. You have a less team culture. It's more like everyone fights for themselves. And that can result in increased intention to leave a company. Teams can also struggle with the added time and effort needed to locate information from other team members who are also working remotely, because you can't just turn around and talk to the person unless the person is actually online right now and I have a tool or a possibility to actually contact this person right away. But that's not always the case. Especially new team members, like graduates just finished university and have joined the team, they might find themselves struggling with the reduced supervision and guidance to learn and grow because they are not surrounded by those people who have already years of experience. They are now separated from the team working from home, for example. So they need to figure out who knows what so they can actually start gathering the knowledge and learn. And all these changes require a change of mindset and operating model. And our objective should be to support and manage a distributed workforce in a more fluid and integrated way. And that brings us to the rules of engagement. So by now, most of us have been down the path of digital transformation that can take most companies in the AEC industry months, if not years, to adopt. So those that haven't started yet, they need a certain amount of time to get where most of us are already. And that does not only include BIM authoring products, but also the way we use communication tools like Teams, Zoom, and others. So it is very important that we choose the one that works best for what we do. And don't hesitate to take advantage of the tools to increase the efficiency of your team. And also make sure that you set clear expectations for how the remote support will work and what they can expect from it. And last but not least, it is very important to define the means, the frequency, and also the idle timing of communication. Like, when are you available, or when is a BIM manager available to provide support or to answer questions? In general, many remote BIM managers have established a daily call with their remote teams to make sure there is nothing blocking them from achieving their goals. So they have like a general recurring conference call, for example, in the beginning of the week, to talk about what the team is going to do this week. Is everyone in the right place? Do they have the tools? Do they have the licenses they need to actually do what they need to do? And this could be, for example, a series of one-on-one calls. So if your team members work more independently from each other, you would do that. Or you could also schedule a Teams call if their work is highly collaborative. So depending on what project we're talking about, which workflow and culture, you would choose a different kind of setup for such a call. It is also important that the features, so that the calls are regular and predictable, and that they are a forum which team members know that they can actually consult with you, so they really can talk about what's required, and not it's about like controlling, or in worst case even being recorded and then could be used. I don't want to say against me, but people are more reserved when they know a call is being recorded, and they might not actually say what they want to say. So in a non-distributed workforce, we know from experience that lack of communication can be a real challenge. But if it's a distributed workforce, it's even harder. So when people are more remote working, under communication is a constant risk. And those team members that belong to the group of the very aware, they usually know the workflows and processes inside out. So these are usually what we call the tool champions. They don't need much support. They are good on their own. So beyond your daily check-ins, over-communicating is a key factor when it comes to the tasks, the duties, responsibilities, and desired outcomes of your team. So those team members that belong to the group of the unaware, they don't know the workflows and processes. So these are the ones that we target. And these are the people that sometimes don't even know that there is a BIM manager. They might not know that we exist at all. So therefore, it's important that we over-communicate to be visible, so that a BIM manager can create opportunities such as regular meetings for everyone to talk about their challenges. And then, of course, there is the group of the aware. That is basically the group that sits between these two extremes. These team members, they may not always follow your lead. They might not always know the answers, but they're aware of the do's and don'ts, and they know that you exist. Also, research on emotional intelligence tells us that teams do not only look to their BIM manager for help, but also for clues about to react to challenges. So if you're a BIM manager communicating helplessness and stress to your team, this will have a trickle-down effect on your individual team members. So BIM managers should acknowledge the challenge that a team member has, but also provide trust and confidence in them. And instead of using negative phrases like, oh, that looks really bad, or just giving them kind of negativity, instead be more positive and use phrases more like, this is a challenge, but we as a team, we can fix it. Like, be supportive and make sure they understand that they are not alone. They are not in a survival mode. It's more in a team mode. And with this kind of support, team members, particularly remote team members, are more likely to take up a challenge with a more positive feeling. especially for newly remote team members. So team members that join the team while the others are already working for a while as one team. It is important for BIM managers to acknowledge stress, to listen to concerns, and to empathize with their challenges. If your team is struggling but not communicating, you may just have to ask them how they're doing. Just basically contact them and just randomly asking them how they're doing. Are you okay? And they might give you some feedback that you might not otherwise have heard, and that could have stopped you to actually dealing with a real issue on your project. And once you ask that question and people actually give you feedback and tell you where they need help, then let the stress, the concern, or the challenge of that particular remote team member be the focus of that conversation. Now, I would say it's basically up to you to establish your own rules of engagement with your team for the project that you're supporting remotely. And make sure that you use video conferencing for daily check-ins that have more visual contact instead of just messaging when it's urgent. Establish your team's expectation on the time, the best time to reach you for an ad hoc call. So to make sure you actually have the time to really help them and they are not being stressed or you're not being stressed because you actually have a deadline right now to deal with. Make sure that your team knows how they can reach you in case of an emergency. Like, is it by phone? Is it by WhatsApp, by email? Like, what's the best way to reach out to you? And once established, the most important factor is also that your team shares the same expectation for communication, the way you as a team would like to communicate with each other, because every team is different. And that brings us to the next topic, cloud collaboration. So how do we, apart from communication, are we also using tools like cloud collaboration? So remote team members are quite often surprised by the added time and effort needed to gain access to knowledge. And this issue can be addressed by implementing knowledge sharing platforms such as Microsoft SharePoint. This issue can also extend beyond training and support to finding and knowing about company standards, templates, and workflows. And the implementation of a cloud storage system, such as Microsoft Office, such Microsoft OneDrive, could be the answer to such a challenge. And then, of course, there's also data corruption when using unsupported workflows, such as file-based work sharing using VPN or FTP solutions. That, again, we can easily solve that when we talk about cloud collaboration using tools like ProjectWise or Autodesk Construction Cloud. So, having dealt with cloud collaboration issues, we're coming to the next chapter, which is about coaching, mentoring, and managing, which is, again, something that we do on a daily basis as BIM managers. So companies in general, they want their teams to learn quickly to improve productivity. And achieving this goal involves coaching, mentoring, and managing. And the primary difference between coaching, mentoring, and managing are based on the relationship between the individuals and what outcome they're looking for. So as BIM managers, we should understand the difference between leadership and management. So you should try to coach and mentor more than you actually manage your team members. So you might have seen this graphic before. It's basically the learning curve of a user when they work with a new tool, with a new software application, for example, Revit. So we all had our day one with the platform that we're using. And the day one, I'm usually referring to as phase one, where we had no clue. It's a no clue phase one stage. And then you usually have a training session. If you were lucky, you have a training session with a marketing representative, like an Autodesk marketing person. They have all this prepared material where everything looks very easy, everything goes fast and with no effort. And that's where we usually have the phase two, the peak of excitement. We're still in the beginner stage, but we think everything is easy. Like modeling a building is like pushing the button B on the keyboard, and that's it. And back in the office, in the real world, we're realizing things are not that easy. We're looking back to the days when we worked with our previous tools like AutoCAD, Vectorworks, or whatever it was. And we are very negative to the new tools. And this is what I usually refer to why this phase stage. And then as we are getting more open to the new tool and giving it a try, we are more experimenting with it, phase 4 starts to happen. This is the slope of enlightenment. That's more of the advanced stage. And as we keep pushing and keep trying to get better at what we do, sooner or later we reach the level of an expert. And if you keep going, you will become the chosen one, maybe one day even a BIM manager. And this is a kind of learning curve where we're all going through, and not everyone goes through all stages. Some people stop at one, and that's just fine. But we need to know where each individual in our team sits, so we know how to support them correctly and give them the guidance that they need. So coming back to coaching, mentoring, and managing, as a coach, we have to focus on solution and strategies and set goals to create outcomes and to manage personal changes. If we mentor a team member, so as a mentor, we provide wisdom and guidance based on our own experience. Like a coaching and mentoring focusing on solutions rather than problems, but there is more telling in mentoring than in coaching. As a manager, we should focus on problems rather than solutions. So by managing, it is more advising than telling to achieve an operational result. And then, just to complete the cycle, there's also counseling. But as BIM managers, we are not certified for that, so we just leave it. And that brings us to the end of this session. So the lessons learned, to wrap things up. It is important to understand the challenges, from under communication to lack of face-to-face supervision to lack of information. It is important to improve the support of our remote team members with regular structured check-ins. It is important to make use of multiple communications options by using all the tools that you have. So don't limit yourself to emails or Teams. Use all the tools that you have in the best way to support your work. Provide ongoing support and encourage your team to take ownership and to reinforce accountability. So if people ask you for help, don't do the work for them. Do it with them in a point of that you actually show them how to do it, so they're being enabled. Otherwise, people will never start to take ownership of their own work and also not take account, or will not be accountable for it. So really keep that in mind. Don't start doing the work for them, helping them, enable them so they can do it by themselves. Also, remember the difference between the disciplines of leadership and management, and always try to coach and mentor your team members more than you actually manage them. And yes, to everyone here who's facing all these challenges for the first time, I like to add my own encouragement to you by saying, you got this. And with that, if we have some time left, we can answer some questions.